And I'm gonna be high.
Good on you, Donald. I'm the Rocket Man. Yeah.
I'm a rocket man. And I'm gonna be
Rocket Man.
I'm a rocket man.
Go to the moon.
Eric, you don't need much of an introduction in freight tech. You're kind of leading the way in a lot of the freight tech, especially LTL. Nobody is building freight tech besides TMSs, besides Navix, and maybe a few other applications I'm forgetting. But you're the founder of Navix. Take me through real quickly, not your entire founder story, but why you started Navix, because it is an interesting place to go into. I would call it to tee you up. There's LTL pricing, like the carriers and 3PL blankets, and then freight bill, audit, and pay are like the mafia. You don't mess with those groups. Like, it's the good old boys club. And there's a lot of big firms who receive freight bills, audit them, and then send checks to all the carriers, and you can never displace them because they're the bank. So why did you do it?
Yeah, well, I'd say, this all started actually because I had some close relationships with a president and a CEO of a 3PL that primarily focused on LTL and managed transportation. And, as we were having conversations, they were like, this is the part that is really, really challenging and part of where we differentiate ourselves in the market. And yet from a technology perspective, it was lagging, right? Everything there, it didn't exist. And so either is you have to build a bunch of proprietary technology where you can't really service those needs and or those uniquenesses tied to an LTL and or even managed transportation. And that, for us was an opportunity. We saw that. We looked at the market and we're like, no one's touching LSPs, right? Like,
No.
they are the dual-sided challenge, right? They have AR and AP as being a difficulty. There were companies that had incumbents that had kind of trailblazed the space, but then you have since been acquired. And we thought, well, the one part that they didn't serve was LTL, right? And traditional freight audit was gain share. It's how do I win off of all of the discrepancies and the errors that you continue to make. And we continued to look at this space and thought there's just nothing that's solving LTL audit well. And
Yeah.
that for us spurred opportunity. And so it was in partnership with a 3PL that really was our beta customer from day one, that rather than them trying to build proprietary technology themselves, luckily they, worked with us and decided, hey, let's build this together or build this and have it as its own separate entity. And from there, we built Navix, and Navix now services all modes, although its kind of upbringing was primarily servicing the LTL community. It's now, we're handling full truck, drayage, intermodal, what have you. And the nice thing is that as soon as you solve LTL and you do really well there, moving over into truck and some of the automation we can do in full truck and some of the things that we can do even against the incumbents in those spaces, it just, helps us just continue to accelerate in the market and solve a problem that, as you said, has been owned by some majority big players that are simply looking for, not getting to solve why this keeps occurring, but are actually almost incented to let it continue to occur. And it didn't benefit anyone, right? So other than them, because they were the ones that got paid off of recovery that they could identify.
Yep.
And we felt that that's just not like, I want discrepancies to go away. And a lot of people think that I'm crazy that I say that, because technically our business is built on helping this stuff flow more easily.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, there's also so much other data and insight that you can derive from this that I think often gets missed and should be treated just as valuable as everything else that you're doing tied to a audit process and a recovery process.
Yeah.
So
Do you think that the reason, and I think high level, broad strokes, the reason that these incumbents didn't necessarily want to get rid of variances is that You nailed it when you said gain share. Whatever their pricing is, the incentive is wrong, right? And so I'm an entrepreneur. I run rocket shipping. I want to keep customers, so I want to build as big a moat as I can so
Yep.
that customers never have to leave. But it's a fine line between building a moat with product and trapping people, right? You don't want to trap a shipper.
Yeah.
And I do think that this could be true in any business, in any industry, but
Agreed.
particularly the two that
Agreed.
I see it in is TMS, pay a one-time annual or very long-term fee. If you've already paid for it, you'll implement it, even if it takes 12 months, because you've gone through the pain of the 12 months and you've paid. So I don't like that type of business, but that's what the biggest providers do. And then in freight bill audit and pay, they do the freight pay to trap you so that, I mean, if you're a large enterprise and you're a large supply chain and you have over 100 different carriers to pay, and one company's doing all that on different speeds and they're paying and they're maybe even floating money, you're paying them a fee, but it's so much admin that you don't even have in place. And then they say, yeah, we'll do the audit portion too. It's pretty hard to bring in anybody else to do the audit because then
That's
they've built a moat.
That's exactly what's happening. And part of the reason from a strategy perspective, we've adamantly said we are not getting into actually, think of it both sides. We don't generate invoices for customers.
Yeah.
That can be a function of a TMS or an ERP. And we do not facilitate settlement or payment to the carrier.
So smart. Somebody should have done
Because-
that before you, but I'm glad you did.
So, because if you think about it, everything in between is actually really where a lot of the real value is. Don't get me wrong. Payments challenging and settlements are hard. Customer invoicing is extremely hard. Providing supplemental documentation, that should be easy, right? And actually having the ability to upload that into all those unique customer portals. Obviously, if we have the repository of the data or we have the images, why can't we easily attach those, and upload those to a portal?
Yeah.
But we're not going to be the actual source of generating the invoice because we didn't want our hand caught in the cookie jar tied to the funds. As soon as we start handling
You
the
didn't want to
funds,
be a bank. Yeah.
it misaligns our incentive and or what value we're delivering to the customer, right? And I think greasing the skids to get them to a point in which they're billing their customer faster isn't necessarily mean that they're going to get paid faster. It just means that the clock is going to start ticking faster. And same with settlements, right? We don't control when a customer of ours actually pays the carrier, but can I get them to a point in which they can settle, let's say, faster if they wanted to? Yes, because we've already validated that this is when you should be paying the carrier as quickly as possible.
And
So,
if your customers are LSPs, which I think that's right now
Yep.
your main audience, and I'll call that a brokerage, right? It could be a lot managed trans. It could be a lot of things within LSP. But just speaking of cash flow for a brokerage, and I'm not selling Navix on this. I do use Navix. I'm not selling it to anybody else right now. But if you go high level and you talk about if you can invoice 5 days faster to the customer to start the clock, and you pull a little bit of cash forward and you're doing 40 or 50 million as a small broker, 5 days, if your DSO goes down by 5, just because you're able to invoice faster, that has nothing to do with actually getting paid. But if you get it out the door faster after delivery and it's accurate, so when they go to pay, there's not as many short pays. And then the third part is, what you need to pay the carrier on a schedule, whether you're paying the carrier in 30 days or in 15 or in 7 or in 1 day paying truckload. If you know what you need to pay and it's the approved amount, then you have an advantage over every other brokerage that doesn't have that, because every other brokerage is using a TMS or Denim or HallPay or any factoring company or QuickBooks or NetSuite or Great Plains, whatever they're using, or maybe they're just using a homegrown TMS to create an invoice. But if you're all competing and they're all just a bunch of brokerages offering differentiated services or modes or customer service or technology, but one of them is winning the cash flow game, that company wins every single time, because brokerages are basically non-sophisticated banks at that point. If you're floating money for customers at a high level and you don't have an eye on where it's going and you can't get it out the door quick enough, then that's how you lose. It's on the margins. You can win or lose on 2 or 3 days.
You know how many companies we go into we start asking these questions tied to, what's your average days to bill on average post delivery? What's your average days post first receipt of, any paperwork associated with the loan? What's your days to bill and days to settle on average? And what's your average net term? You get into all those metrics, the number of times that you just see deer in headlights.
Yeah, you're
I
speaking a
mean,
different language.
yeah. And I think like Navix, we often speak primarily to DSL reduction, right? Because
Yeah.
that's one of the best areas that we can facilitate and or add value to our customers. But I think the other side of it is it's overall financial health and visibility.
Yeah.
It's sure where is this? What is the status of every single bill? Where is it? Have I paid it? Have I billed it? Do I have all the appropriate documentation? Right? Like it's more so than just I'm going to accelerate your DSO. It's look at my overall financial health, and you can be more strategic about, oh, well, I'm getting these approved within 2 days. Should I go talk to that carrier about possibly offering them a different type of term for payment because I know I can get these processed so quickly.
Yeah.
Therefore, maybe I can get an added discount, right? Or like a quick pay program, right? But like, or can I go work with this customer knowing that, hey, I'm able to get the bills out the door within 2 days post delivery and they're accurate every single time. Can I find a way to negotiate something into that relationship with that, that customer, right?
Yep.
So just having that overall financial health is important. And you hit the nail on the head. DSO, everyone's like, oh yeah, I want to get paid faster. I'm a bank and cash flow is important. I don't think people understand and can quantify really the importance of it, right? 5 days on a $50 million broker, we're talking $700,000, $800,000 a year in cash flow.
Yeah. And then
What
that's
can we
if
do
you
with
get paid
700,
on
right?
time, right?
Correct.
Well, let's say I think a lot of the times, and this happened to Rocket last summer, we had a customer who didn't pay us at all, right? And they ended up paying us. I think they might get it paid off before the end of the year. This is a Christmas episode, so we'll see. But it was 530 grand. And so we didn't get paid at all. Well, that's one big thing, right? But if you focus all your effort on, hey, we had bad debt. Every brokerage goes through bad debt. I don't care who you are.
Everyone does.
Worldwide Express Group, $5.6 billion brokerage in LTL, they have a lot of bad debt. But if you just have your eye on, and then every broker can relate with that and logistics service provider. But then if that's all your focus is like, don't have bad debt. It's also just death by 1,000 cuts if you have customers paying at 47 days, 51 days, 72 days. If you've got 20 of those customers, it's just as bad as bad debt because you can't pull cash forward. And if you're paying your carriers on 45-day terms or 60-day terms, they're not going to be your carriers for much longer. You just can't do that. So then you do become a bank, and on the margins, if you can just get them to pay on time, or if they're going to pay 45 days, but you invoiced it 7 days sooner, you're at 38. You only have 8 days of flow. So that's,
Yeah, I think there's a part of this that, and I call it newer to the industry, right? I've always been in supply chain technology, but
Yeah.
First, this is my full foray into logistics and transportation specifically. And I'd say that this industry operates a little differently than others that I've been a part of, which has primarily been around transactional information and or data, payments, invoicing, net term, right? It was primarily in retail, food, other supply chains and value chains in which there's still an exchange of monetary value and goods. And I think the biggest thing that causes that type of death by 1,000 cuts and or ability not to necessarily set different terms with shippers and or even carriers for that matter is its trust. Okay. And trust matters more than anything else because you could say, if you actually had the data to support it, to go and have a conversation with a shipper related to, we bill you accurately 98% of the time.
Yep.
Why are you reviewing our bills? Every single one of them. Or hey, can we come up with a different payment term or different payment method altogether to help facilitate why, why are you holding or delaying any of my payment if I'm billing you accurately every single time? I think often people don't have the backup and or supporting documentation to show that here's what's delaying it or why that's getting delayed. And often I think it's looked at as a game, but I think trust is important because the data leads to the trust, and then the trust will lead to ultimately your ability to, let's say, have a realistic conversation with why are you paying me 61 days, even though we're on net 45, that it's, not, like you said, not bad debt. It's just, that's their choice. And how can
Well,
you ignore it?
and you do have to take part of this, and I'll zoom back out. And the reason I do this podcast is to talk to business owners like you that are either just experienced in running a business and you can talk about all the things you screwed up along the way, or are doing something pretty unique in the LTL or truckload or the transportation space. Obviously, I play in LTL the most. But if I zoom out from like days sales outstanding, I go way up, the biggest game that there is in LTL brokerage, and especially in the agent model and all the worldwide expresses, global transunit shippers, all of those types of players, is billing variances are made into a profit center. And I'm not, that's me objectively saying that happens because 50% of the customers that we bring on are from those brands. And then they come to Rocket. And one of the biggest pain points, we have all kinds of marketing material built on it, is I have to chase my money around because, and I can say out loud that unit shippers worldwide typically bill before you get to audit it. You just get billed. So they have a process where they might be auditing internally, but the customer's just going to get the bill.
Yeah.
And then they have to say, hey, this was billed more than quoted. And then they have to short pay or get a credit, or they've already been charged on their credit card. And at Rocket, before I even met Navix, one of the things that I did differently, because I've heard customers say that's a pain, is I don't bill until, for most customers, with a caveat, some of them we have agreements that we do within a certain threshold because we have
Yep.
really accurate freight audit. But even before the freight audit was, we don't bill until we've already told you that there's a variance, what it's for, if we can dispute it, if we dispute it and lost, if there's a reclass and it's bogus and we have to split it. And I was able to build a book of business in 2021 with only that service as a differentiator. We were shipping to curbside delivery and we would do freight bill audits. We wouldn't bill you until, so we could hold it. And, that was the only differentiated service we had. And it was easy to get customers because if you just simply wait to bill it. Now, you're also solving that, Navix is, but just in general, let's talk about the problems. Instead of just your guys' solution, the problem is that the LTL carriers are very sophisticated with their rebills. They don't mess around and no one can control them. And so that is part of the problem, is that the LTL carrier army of dimensionalizers came to play. Like, it used to just be he said, she said, and now it's we said, you pay. And I think that you guys are providing a service for the LSPs to combat that as well, to only get the variances that are real. Because if you can't catch all of them, then you just don't have any data to provide back. Like, hey, you're hitting us with limited access 3 times out of the last 80 on the same shipment, same lane, same carrier. Can you please stop doing that? And you can win those disputes if you have data. And you know how to go past the first
transparency.
layer and go to a local terminal and all the other tricks. But
Trust and transparency. I mean, that's
Yeah.
the thing. It goes both ways, shipper and carrier, right? Like, well, often this isn't, none of this data is exposed.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone in a TMS that we work with on the LTL side, if you ask them how frequently a specific type of accessorial gets charged for a specific customer, they have no clue.
Yeah.
They don't, unless they
They
have
can find a
to
way
like
that the
go do
customer's
for
yelling
data
at them about
mining
right
But
now.
like, you're right that like the 3 times for the exact same shipment, and you're like, I literally ship the exact same goods on, and the same exact pallet of this every single time. Why 10 out of the 80 times did you do it? Right? Like, why did I get billed this? Right? So you can find and uncover those things. Those aren't gonna move the needle. It's just to have visibility into it, right? Like,
Yeah.
I think that's the big thing, and that gives you the opportunity to have that better transparency with your customer, right?
Mhm.
Because then you're gonna initially quote them more accurately up front, and be able to get those types of discrepancies resolved that much quicker. Now knowing that you have the data to support it. So
Yeah, especially I think of this in carrier relationships. If we have accurate data and we build a partnership and they trust us and we trust them, then I have certain customers where we just bill the next day after the shipment picks up because I know the quote's going to be good enough, right? It's going to be 95% of the time, I'm not going to get billed more than the carrier quoted. And the 5% of the time that I do, We'll dispute only the ones that we think are worth disputing and that were a mistake. And we eat the rest. We build that into our operating costs so that there is no balance dues. And that came from the idea, that's a sophisticated way, I think, of doing it. But that came from back in the day when I was working at DLS Worldwide. If there's a bunch of billing variances and my customer kept getting noisy about it, and they were like, hey, and when you said it's the same pallet and we ship at the same time on the same lane, that conversation from a customer has happened to me over 8 years, like maybe 100 times a year, where it's just like,
all the time.
it's
All
like,
the time.
hey, you can't reclass this. I ship this all the time with Global Trans and Freight Quote and this, and they don't reclass it. But the real problem is that no one was passing the fee on, but the LTL carrier reclassed it every time. And so they played with NMFC codes or whatever it was. And there was all this like collusion almost of all the brokers just being like, I'll put more margin on the account and I won't bill it back. And so talk me through, maybe you get this objection, maybe you don't, but talk me through. At Rocket, oftentimes we'll bring a tech forward, transparent solution to a shipper and they go, well, you have more billing variances than T-Force Worldwide. And I'm like, no, you're seeing more of them. like that's a pretty big hurdle in the industry. If I have that in a micro level with certain clients, do you have that as an objection when you go in? Like, hey, your solution's great, Eric, but like our customers don't want to pay and we can't convince them to. And so it's like easier to just not do it.
I wouldn't say we've really ever had that as a pure objection, but I would say that it definitely comes up. I mean, I gave that example earlier. The number of times that you really get into it, with a prospective client around what they're doing today and measurements and everything else. I would say a majority of them don't have what they really maybe either want, and some might just not want it because they don't think the juice maybe is worth the squeeze. But I often argue that with, well, how do you know? Right? I mean,
You plan on being in business for 3 to 5 more years at least? Well, you could probably start capturing the data now and then you'll know.
everyone's like, hey, I'll set my variance at X because anything below that, right? Like the effort and or amount of time spent to go try and resolve that or fight that it doesn't come out to be a winner in the end, right? Well, and I go back to them all the time and I'm like, well, what if it happened automatically? So like, what if we found that it was a discrepancy? You still approved it, you still billed the customer, but what if we still then actually also, file the dispute automatically because it identified that via a systematic process rather than a human having to spend any time and energy on that.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Well, now we're, like it's the reason that they don't do it is because they just have to throw more bodies at it. And, that's, but they also don't know how often it's happening or what could be recovered or what couldn't be recovered. You talk to folks all the time about, do you measure anything tied to when you dispute something, your win-loss ratio, how many dollars you actually get out of it? Is it, no one can actually tell you an exact measure of what that looks like.
Exactly. And so we've nerded out quite a bit here. I'm going to back up a little bit. So when you started Navix, it was the 3PL partner said, hey, this would be a useful thing. No one's doing this. And then it was just gravy from there. You never had any struggles, right? It was just up and to the right.
No.
Take me through the up and the right.
Everything's got its challenges, right? Like I call it, even though we're growing very quickly and adding new customers left and right. Oh man, we've had our own challenges. Don't get me wrong. I mean, we're 3.5 years old and I've graded probably more in the last 3.5 years than I have in the rest of my life. But an example is early on, we kind of offered we kind of did a tech managed services play, right? And we thought that's what a lot of the incumbents were doing. They were also, had the human capital behind it to do some of the tasks that still require a human to look at it. And, then you were like, well, but they're using our tech and that was creating efficiency. So we thought that it would be a win-win, right? Like it'd be our, people in there doing the functions and it'd be a win-win where we could get margin off of the people and we could get margin off of the technology.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, about, year and a half into it, we were like, wait, this doesn't add up right. Or we don't really like, this is now, we're basically managing 2 distinct businesses. We were managing a managed services business, BPO basically. and we were a technology company, right? And I would say, like, of all the headaches, that was the one that I kind of was like, it was more distracting than anything. And one of the biggest challenges that I think we had faced as a business was differences in customer expectations tied to those that couldn't be standardized when we had the managed services piece.
Yeah.
If you have technology, much simpler, right? It's, hey, this is our technology. These are the features. This is our roadmap. This is how it's supposed to be utilized, and training people on how to do that. If they told me they need to, bill a specific customer or prioritize specific stuff that they had maybe in a backlog, great. Like, they can do that. They can tell their own people to do that, right? In the application. But when it was managed through us, oftentimes we'd get lost in communication, or tribal knowledge would get lost because they just know their business better. And
Yep. And then if
I'd
you
say,
dilute it at all, then the customer's not happy.
yeah, I'd say as much as you can translate it into the technology and via the business rules that we allow them to do, it still is, there's still some nuanced stuff, or, oh, I have to go to this person tied to this one type of exception to get this type of approval. Well, to have a technology know that exact decision tree for that one very unique instance, and that just is like, well, that wouldn't maybe necessarily be applicable. But no, we've had our learnings along the way, I call it. Everything's a learning moment, a learning opportunity, and some call them bumps and bruises, and we've definitely had those. So
What do you think of 2025 strategy? Is your ICP, as in like what customer you're going to serve? Are you going to expand that, or are you going to go deeper into your current offering? What's your strategies for that, without obviously giving anything away if you have other things? But
hey, I think a lot of folks know that where this is going is, and our vision all along has been, how do we help solve speed of cash across the entire ecosystem, right? So from a shipper to an LSP to a carrier, they all have the problem. They all hate this problem. They all want to solve it. They all want cash to move more efficiently across this value chain. And so I would say that we're going to focus a lot on those other, let's say, how do we help accelerate cash in any way, shape, or form that we can across the ecosystem. But our primary focus is going to be LSP, going deep, becoming the best of breed, and I feel we are, but becoming, widening that moat tied to what solution we're solving for LSPs. But I think you'll also see us start considering what other areas within even an LSP contribute to that end vision, right? So how do we help you accelerate cash flow? And it's not in the actual exchange of the monetary value, but are there other things in which we can offer from a solution provider and or technology provider that help you accelerate your cash? Could that be interconnectedness with specific LTL carriers, where they also don't necessarily need human capital associated with this process on their end? Would it be something maybe tied to the shipper, or even just internally from an LSP's perspective? So I'd say that's primarily our strategy, and we're really looking for, I call it scale in 2025, right? So we've solved a very niche problem and done it very well. We have very happy customers, you as well. So thank you.
Yeah.
And at the same time, like, now we just need to figure out how do we go further. I would even call it down market, right? And start working with some of the smaller to mid-sized brokerages in more of a self-serve model, right? Because if we can enable that and unlock that to where they can pretty much buy Navix with a credit card and bolt it onto their, TMS process and just add it and flow everything through because of the reusability across the platform, that's going to even unlock that much more potential for us as we go forward.
It reminds me of when I used to run an e-commerce brand. Shopify had like a plugin that Shopify made that you could track your ROAS and track like other metrics. It was free, but you could bolt it on, and maybe it's paid now. But you could kind of connect your Google ads, your Facebook ads, and all of the money you spent. And then they would just already have data that they had about how much you'd sold and what the cost of goods was. And it would tell you like your ROAS is 3, which is what ours always was, which wasn't nearly good enough, which is why I don't run an e-commerce business anymore. But separate story, different day. But I mean, if Navix could plug in, or if something like that would plug into a TMS where there's already a cash flow process, but it would give them more clarity into what they have to pay their carrier next. If there was any disputes, how many are in dispute, how many they won, how much their customers have been paying them, DSO. I don't know if that really exists today. I mean, every TMS has its own unique function. In Rocket, we have our own that we've been bolting on and building and licensing. And now we've got some really cool stuff in 2025, finally all on one system. Big deal for us. But if we could have a dashboard, and I'm just speaking, and I know that like a lot of the podcasts I've done so far maybe are wide ranging. When I brought you on, I was like, I'm going to talk about running a brokerage and LSP because I know that some people who are doing that listen to this, and this is valuable stuff. Cash flow and DSO, it's kind of boring, and so is freight bill audit, but it's how you either make or break a brokerage is 2 to 3% here or there on the margins, unless you have technology, and then you can have SaaS, and that's really fun too. But
Yeah. I think like you're spot on. So one of the things that we've explored and, I think how do we make our lift lighter to utilize Navix? Okay. Right.
yeah,
Because Navix is so configurable, tied to, customer business rules, carrier business rules, what to do with specific types of accessorials, right? We can get to all those different levels of granularity quite easily. But how do we do that in a way that it allows a customer to do that very quickly, right? To say, I'm just going to start piping my order data or load data into Navix. Navix can also, if I can just get a carbon copy, they can literally run of all the EDI or the APIs direct to the LTL carriers, which we have them all pre-built. But like if you already had them existing, can we just run analysis side by side of what would have possibly been suspended? What are the most common types of exceptions, right? Before really having someone say, okay, now I'm going to integrate my rating engine. I'm going to integrate my, all of the data coming back into Navix. And I want Navix to actually be that source that is doing that workflow. Creating that value proposition quicker and with a lighter lift is going to be, I think, utmost importance as we look into 2025. So,
all right, abrupt turn. Who's
Sure.
Eric Krueger?
Who
Do you
am
have
I?
you have a wife? Do you have kids? What's your life like? What do you do? You're a founder in freight
Sure.
tech, and I do think that you guys are a VC. Like you guys have some VC component, or is it private equity? But like
Yeah.
you're building, which maybe you've seen other episodes. I have certain opinions on VC, but it belongs exactly in companies like Navix and not in companies like Convoy. But so how do you balance that? You've got, I don't know if you're in your 30s maybe, but what does that life look like to you?
Yeah. So no, I'm married, got 2 kids. I got a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old. My wife worked for years at Best Buy here locally in the Twin Cities and then worked at Target. And as of late, with Navix continuing to take more and more of my time, she officially retired to become the CEO of the household
Hardest
in
job
May
there
of this
is.
year. And yeah, we got our hands full. We also have 2 dogs. A 9-year-old yellow lab named Reese, and like Reese Witherspoon or Reese's Pieces, and a Australian Shepherd that's named Ruby. So our lives are chaotic.
It's 5 and 2. I've got 6'4" too, so I know what you mean.
Yeah, and we both born and raised here in Minnesota. Love Minnesota. We're northern folks. We like to get out in the wilderness and do the fun things up north on the lakes. We love to golf. I used to be a big runner, not anymore. I need to get back into some sort of a workout routine, but I ran for quite some time in my my life, and yeah, now it's funny. We were just getting ready for the holidays here and Christmas, and Christmas lists have been harder and harder to come by for me when everyone's looking for ideas because it's the only thing that I'm doing right now is Navix, and so
You don't have a hobbies. You
know,
can't buy him you could get him golf clubs. He's
life
probably
of a
got those.
CEO and founder, man. It's not like, oh, I got to go out and golf like every day or do all these things. And you get this, you're grinding every single day in this business. And it's pretty much what I live and breathe right now and outside of kids and family. So
Minnesota,
that's my
though,
life.
that's
what
a
I
unique
do.
aspect is that you're from Minnesota. So am I. I think you're the first Minnesotan I've had on the podcast and probably will be one of the last for a while because there's not many. But how do you go from did you grow up in Minneapolis area or were you from northern Minnesota? Where'd you grow up?
So I grew up in Maplewood, which is northeastern suburb of St. Paul. And my wife grew up in Walker, Minnesota. So
That's
or
not
actually
the cities.
Hackensack, Minnesota is technically
That's
actually where she
crazy.
grew up.
Walker. That's where my brother-in-law and my sister-in-law through Michael, that's where her parents live. And so that's where they go for holidays is Walker.
Yeah, I was just there on
Walker
the weekend.
Hackensack.
We were just up in Hackensack.
Yeah, that's awesome. So
Yeah,
but I bring
so
it up. This is not the tech capital of the world. I know Fargo, I sometimes say, is the tech capital of freight because Rocket is here, but it's not. So how did you end up in technology? Or maybe you're not a technical founder and you have a co-founder who's technical. Walk me through that. You end up
yeah,
starting a tech
so
brand.
actually there's a local company here in the Twin Cities that's actually probably one of the I call it most successful technology companies that no one's ever heard of. And it's a company called SPS Commerce. And they're publicly traded, so you can go
Yeah.
check them out if you want. But out of college, I had I actually had an accounting and econ background. Coming out of college, I decided I didn't want to do the big four accounting audit route, like actual true audit, like tax and corporate
Yeah,
finance.
not freight on it.
Yeah, not freight audit. And I basically was like, that's not something I want to do. Right. So I went into some management trainee programs with some local businesses here, did that for about 2.5 years. And then I made the jump. I made this jump to a company called SPS. I didn't even know what EDI stood for at that time. Right. They're like, oh, we sell EDI. We're an EDI company. I was like, what's EDI? And oh, we're trying to interchange. Well, I spent 8 years there in a lot of different roles and primarily focused on go-to-market strategy. So it was like aligning internal product teams to net new markets and figuring out commercially, how do you do it? How do you penetrate the market? How do you support the market from a product perspective? What do we need to do to make that successful and or a segment? And then I'd build it and I'd move to the next, right? Or I get asked to move to the next. So it'd be like, go build an SMB or a mid-market business segment. And then I did that in retail. Then go build a, grocery and food and logistics, segment that I, primarily pursued. I built an OTM carrier connectivity program inside of it. Like it was all net new kind of segments of business that then they ultimately built teams around based on what I uncovered as I kind of, penetrated it. And so then I spent my career there and learned a lot about product market fit, strategy, commercialization,
Building teams, everything.
building team, kind of always being the tip of the spear
Yeah.
to work closely with product. And then I did a foray with a company called Crisp, which was focused on highly perishable food item,
Good name.
demand planning and forecasting, and then leveraging data to understand where shrink was occurring with inside grocery stores and food distributors. And that was a pure startup. They were a seed company and that was my first oh, I'm on the roller coaster.
Yeah.
I realized what the roller coaster feels like now.
Whatever. Startups are the most stable thing you can get on.
So that was my first, true startup. And then that's what led me here to Navix. And I just have an itch for building things. I have a good itch for technology. I think often people try and overcomplicate it. And I try and always bring it back down into layman's terms and just what's the ultimate value that this would provide someone. And if you can combine a very specific value proposition that is very easy to articulate and
Yeah.
understand with, a known problem that is generally fraught with manual intervention, it's usually a pretty good story for success. That's what SPS did. That's what Crisp did. That's what we're doing here at Navix. And so, getting people out of looking at PDFs. Gabe, you'd be surprised how many people,
I would
how
not.
many
but
companies
most
we
would
still
be
talk to
surprised.
that literally have people sitting in offices looking at PDFs and comparing those to the TMS. And that's how they're processing everything today.
And if they're super sophisticated, this will lead me to my next topic. If they're super
Yeah,
sophisticated, then they offshore a bunch of people.
Oh yeah,
looking
that
at
was a big
PDFs.
phase. That was a big phase. And hey, there are these cheaper resources to do it. You're just down south all up the across
They
the
can't make
ocean
any
or across
mistakes,
the
I
pond.
promise. They just upload PDFs and read it.
We're not going to solve the problem. we're just going to lower our cost to solve the problem.
But you
Right?
may have seen, I posted about this in my newsletter on Friday. This is what AI is going to disrupt is the brokerage operations, the LSPs that said, hey, I have to throw human capital at this. Instead, I'll throw an incredible amount of human capital at $1,000 or $2,000 a month in Colombia or Mexico or the Philippines. And Rocket does have employees in the Philippines. We do have back office staff. I don't use it. Like one of the things that I talk about with Troy, our CTO, he builds a bunch of tech for us. I'll have the offshore staff work on something until we automate, and then I automate it. But there are a bunch of brokerages and LSPs who are never looking to automate it. They're just looking to do it cheaper. And AI is going to, the companies who are using AI will be able to do it at zero cost,
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
at fractional cost, and do it without any error. And the AI agent will learn it faster. And you talked about, when you were doing staffing and tech, and I want to get your opinion on this. You had the BPO basically wing of your business, and then you had the tech, and it was hard to scale. Like this brokerage might not want to charge this one customer back because they're a good customer, and even if it is real and it is a variance, don't charge it back, but only if it's under $400. But if it's over, then have it reviewed. That was never scalable until an AI agent is trained by an AI model to be an agent for a brand, and it's like an employee at Rocket. And the AI agent will know everything about my job and every other employee's job, and will know every customer. Then the tech play is the only play because the tech just has to be able to talk. So BPO
Communicate.
companies,
Yep.
unless there might be one or two BPO companies that embrace AI and reduce their own headcount and get more productive for their brands, the rest will go away. There will always be industries where they're at, but not in that role.
Yeah. So I actually, when we did that sunset, right, there were, we got obviously talked to a lot of BPOs, seen a lot of BPOs tied to all the different customers that we're working with, as well as even when we were offering that as a kind of a service. When we got rid of that and went down this route of, we kind of thought, well, we still need partners, right? If we still have a customer that says, hey, I want to do this with you, I want to utilize your technology, Navix. And I'm also thinking about maybe moving this to nearshore resources, right? We wanted to have relationships and good, partners that we could point them in the direction to. And knowing that most brokers have a relationship with a BPO, but like it's artificial if they have a BPO that already knows how to utilize Navix and has already facilitated people in-app utilizing Navix, right? Just having that familiarity with the application. The BPOs that differentiate themselves are the ones that are going out there, not just looking to put another button to seed. They're the ones that are actually going out there and promoting some of the best technologies that they're working with, because they're just thinking more strategically about what they should be doing. I'm not a BPO expert, but you're right. Like this AI agent stuff is I saw, if you've ever listened to a demo of the Happy Robot stuff, and kudos to those guys, it's pretty wild listening to it. I mean, they even have noise in the background. Like it sounds like you're on a brokerage floor and it's like someone talking. I don't think if it called you right now, Gabe, you'd be able to know that it was actually an AI. And
and the argument is that I saw so many arguments against that product. They're like, try to have that when the load is hot or the carrier's not playing, doesn't want to talk to AI and ask for an agent and whatever. And what I don't think people are seeing seems obvious to me. There won't be AI on just one side of the transaction. The carriers will have AI as well.
Exactly. It'll be AI talking to AI for the 80% that go through that anyways.
And it'll be negotiated. So like, and I have different opinions on like the load boards and who sets the rates and but like that is the company now that's valuable because the AIs will both be fighting over the DAT rate or the ITS rate. And, that's not what I was paid on this one. And then there will be, for a while, there'll be a human aspect of like, no, you can't approve that. But it'll be AI on both sides. And so it's obvious that's going to get automated. It's just so obvious.
And if it still can't come to a conclusion, it still gets kicked out to a human.
Yeah, it's 90-10 now. There's still 10% of loads where it's like, hey,
it's still lessening the amount of human interaction altogether. Right. It's the same thing I tell people. I'm like, everyone's like, Eric, can't Navix just automate everything, tied to my exceptions, and can't approve all of these?
No, you want to know.
And if I told you yes, you should be worried. because there are always going to be instances in which a human should still look at a load to fight fraud, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know how many times we see something come in, and since we're already doing a vendor and a remit to and all the other matches that we're automatically doing of the invoice to the load coming out of the TMS, and would you ever want an AI changing the carrier value because of something that it maybe saw on paper, yet it's actually beneficial for us to suspend some of those based on our confidence threshold so that a human still has to look at it, because more often than not has been, oh, it's really close, but this one field is off, and that's leading me to be suspicious.
Yep. But
You
you know
know,
what you need at your company and able to do that, right? In order to do that, and I think that that's why a lot of brokerages and LSPs will be disrupted, is that they've offshored so much because of fractional cost that they don't have any high paid hires in house that are like experts, right? Some of the best of the best. And because they didn't have to, and they were able to build a great business without that. But now you need those people to run the AI and to be the person that, like, you just want to. At Rocket, we have 5 full-time, like, director level operations folks. They're all in account management, customer success, whatever it is, right? But there's 5 of them. And with AI and fractional staffing, I could say, hey, we could have like 3 or 4 people that work under each one of those. With AI, I can just say, hey, I can scale AI into Amanda, and now I have the equivalent of Amanda and 10 operators. But it's just AI. She still
right.
has to be the person that makes the decisions on, like, hey, you know what? That didn't hit cubic capacity. I know it was over length, but that dimension was wrong, and it shouldn't have been 16 feet of trailer. We're going to fight that. AI would have been like, maybe it doesn't know. And that's $8,000. I don't know, but there's so many
It's still
nuances.
set with thresholds, right? Like that's the thing. I mean, I think so. I often have this conversation about brokerages dipping their toe into LTL, and this is the same way that I talk about this is it's you can't just dip your toe in. Okay, the brokerages that are fully investing in AI today are the ones that I think are gonna continue to accelerate their business. But
Same
you
thing.
have to do it, and you have to know it's gonna cost you money, lots of money, because these
Upfront.
resources to train that, to build that are not cheap. Okay. But I think you're investing for your future in that case. And, maybe my one little pun of the day is maybe you could buy Navix, and use that increased cash flow and working capital to make those strategic types of hires. But no, I think, that's what's most important is you can't just dip your toe in. You can't run LTL as a side job at a regular truckload
Oh,
brokerage. You'd have to
although a lot
go,
of them do, and then they
they
just
try to,
then they don't
but
wanna
the
do it
ones
because
that
it's a
do it
headache.
well, are like, all right, we're into this and we're doing it and we're doing it for the next 24 months and building this out. And then they go hire a specific team. And they let it actually build. They don't just go, oh, I'm gonna dabble or dip my toe in. And you have to make that decision as an organization to make that full investment.
Yeah,
And
I think it's one, you could say the same thing of LTL brokers that try to dip their toe in truckload. It's the same. It's less complex and more competitive, right? And so it's like
correct.
different rule set. If you don't have a carrier sales team, you can't do truckload. You can't just have customer sales. In LTL, you can have customer sales only because then you have operations. They're not calling each carrier and like scheduling the load. It's all API. And sometimes you have to reschedule, but truckload's a whole different business model. And I've dabbled in that and
Yeah.
I found that out real quick. But as I wrap up here, Eric, one of the things I ask everybody is what's one mistake you made that you would change? And if you could, like the audience who's listening, they don't have to make the same mistake. It could be about when you started the business, if you should have had a lawyer, or if you should have used a different accountant, or if you hired too fast. Any of those things are fair play, but it has to be something that, hey, I made that mistake and it wasn't crucial to the business being what it is today. In fact, I could have gone without it. Because some mistakes, hiring and firing, you have to learn. Some you don't have to learn. And if I would have just had, before I quit my first job, would have got a lawyer to review my contract before, I would have saved some legal headache, even though I still won. That's one for me. I would have gotten a lawyer earlier on, but how could I have known? What's yours?
I'd say one that sticks out is I think similar vein to what you experienced, right? Was I think we hired more in anticipation for, let's say, a faster growth, even though we're still growing extremely fast. It was, I think we probably became a little bloated at times. And I'd say that the second part of that was tied to that, what I talked about, that Navix Plus, what we
Yeah.
call Navix Plus, Navix SaaS. I almost just wish from the beginning we would have just started in the SaaS route, period.
Yeah.
Because I think we could have run a leaner, more efficient team throughout the life cycle of Navix, and probably could have even invested more dollars in the technology platform itself, which would possibly have even widened the moat further than it is today, from anyone else that's even kind of in this similar space. So
I love to hear it. I have a similar takeaway from that. I think the biggest mistake that I've made, and that it's in the same vein, is that I thought, hey, I have this business unit, it works. I can do it in a similar business unit, and I can do it in a similar thing, and you continue to build out. And I think it boils down to, and what I think you're saying in a boiled down sentence or two is, if it's working, do more of it. Don't move on to the next when you're in startup mode, and maybe just forever. There's really no reason to have 100 employees unless you have to have 100 employees. And I just thought, hey, I'm going to hire a huge team and impact people. And now my whole thing is I'm going to impact the people that work here more, instead of hiring more people just to have them to, to shepherd or whatnot and be able to give them a career. That was my why. It is my why. But now I'm doubling down on, hey, I've already got people. Let's just make their lives even better.
Yeah. And I think, to even piggyback a little bit further on that, going into something now in the future, I will always have more of a operational plan, key roles and responsibilities of every single individual on the team before they're even hired. And I have to have, that has to be very, very clear, right? I think often in a startup, everyone's wearing lots of hats. Everyone's running 100 miles an hour in different directions. And we actually, I think, kind of created a culture. We had such eager, curious, over the top, wanting to, do everything type people, that we ended up stepping on each other's toes a little bit too, right? And I think it actually created a little bit of chaos in the moment rather than clarity, right? So like role clarity, operational clarity. Man, if I were to do this all over again, I would go into it and I'd be like, nope, we're not hiring a single person until you can tell me exactly for 10 hours in a day what that person's going to be doing and exactly what that person's going to be doing. Right.
Oh, that's some good advice. I think that every founder feels that one, because I'm in the middle of that still, and I'm
I am
going on
too.
5 years, and I'm sitting there going, I don't know exactly what, like, there's a director of this and director of that, and they're similar. How do I separate them? And I've learned the hard way that if you don't give people, well, I will caveat this. There are certain people that thrive in that chaos, and those are very valuable people to your company, and they can do a little bit of everything, and they're always eager to help the company grow. And then because you have people like that, I might say, hey, anybody who's not like that, it's like, oh man, they're just not as high producing. But really, it's me not giving them the proper structure and clarity to be high producing. And we had an org review call today with my inner circle at Rocket. And I said, hey, let's grade everybody and let's figure out, we graded them all with a letter, right? And then I went back and I said, does anybody's letter change if they had a better direct report, which was the people on the call? And I'm like, what if they had more clarity? What if they had more structure? What if they were told exactly what to do? And then we debated, is that the type of employee that Rocket needs? Somebody who needs to be told what to do? Or do we just have to have individual contributors who are initiative? And we decided we need both, depending on department. But
I would argue you need both. And I think, but you need to understand who they are, and you provide them that, right? I think when everyone's so busy, it's hard to say, hey, I'm going to sit down and teach this person how to do X, Y, and Z. I almost was kind of expecting people just to come in and
that's
learn
what
it
I
on
hired
their
them to
own,
do.
or
That's
learn on
their job.
own,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, but like that's just not. You can't expect that from every individual you work with and or hire, right? And I think often we find the same type of challenges. I even now, when I hire, I'll be honest. I literally try and the last call I have with someone before actually extending an offer, I literally try and sell them out of not coming to this business. And I tell them, hey, it's chaotic. Hey, it's this. Hey, we burned the midnight oil. Hey, you have this, and some days you're doing this, and even though your role says this, we ask you to help over in this one area, and I try and make it like this isn't a place you want to work, and that really helps me like fish out, are they fit or are they able to come into this type of an environment, and are they going to thrive, or are they going to be that person? They might fail that, let's say, aspect of it, and they might just say this sucks, like I don't want to do that, but at least you then know like that's a person
Gosh.
you need to give 100% clarity of the role. They might be the best person for the role, but now you just know you need to give them and set them up for success by giving them all the tools that they need to be successful. So
I will say one, if we're going to clip that's going to be one of the clips. So Carly, Hannah, Elena, we're going to clip that one because
good.
you're going to save so much time for the next person who's building their business in freight or just any business, but especially in the chaotic freight market where there's all kinds of SaaS brokerage
Yeah.
tools, like everything. You're saving them so much time because when I was like, my best hires were in the beginning when that's the pitch. I was like, I don't know exactly what we're going to do. I'm going to build this thing and it's going to look a little bit like this. And I'm
Yeah.
not going to pay you except for off of commissions. And if we can get to a base salary, that would be awesome. And it was those individuals who were willing to leave their jobs to do that ended up being the most productive, and they're in the board and they're in the C-suite. And it's not necessarily because they were the most skilled people we've ever had on the team. I've fired a lot of people who were very skilled at Rocket, and they were very good at what they did before they got to Rocket, and they're probably going to be good at what they do after Rocket, but they were not built for what we just described, which is burning the midnight oil, all those things. But you just saved people so much time. I thought I had to after the first 5 hires, I just did the exact opposite. I'm like, I'm going to hire for experience, somebody who's done something I haven't done. I'm not going to worry about culture fit as much as I am about talent, A players. The characteristics of the people who would take the job that I described as crazy are the ones that ended up helping me build the cool thing. And now I'm going to apply that. I used to just hire off of all these different things, and I really would try to attract the talent. And I'd be like, hey, how much of a base salary and
I
title
agree.
can I
That's
give
me.
you?
I tried to sell them so hard on the vision and what we're building and how cool it's
And
going
it
to
has
be.
never worked for me. Okay,
I
it has
think-
a couple of times, but
I think you still have to give them that, right? Because they have to see a light at the end of the tunnel, or this like, what you're headed, what direction you're heading in, but the validation of this isn't, you're not leaving your cush 1,300 employee job that or where you're at a 1,300 employee company where, you can come in and maybe
there's
check out from
structure and there's
day in, day out. This is, we aren't going to have a lot of materials. We aren't going to have a lot of things. A lot
or
of things aren't
answers.
gonna work,
We're
right?
not going to have answers. You're going to have to make up some of the answers. And
Yep.
if you make them up really well, then you're going to get promoted really quickly. But I think that one piece of advice, and that's the best one I've gotten so far. We're 8 episodes in, so thank you, Eric. Is try to find the right people for the job. And your advice was, hey, once you've qualified a candidate, try to convince them this isn't for them by telling them exactly what's really going to happen. If they still jump, then you're not getting good hires by accident. You're gating them in. And I just had a board call and I was just saying, how do we attract people like the people in this group? And so thank you for that, Eric. I'm going to try that technique. And
It's worked. It's worked. We've built we got 23 W2 current employees, and man, every one of them, they'll run through a brick wall, and it's awesome. And we're all in this together, and it's fun. It's fun. We even have, we thought we were going to try and eliminate meetings from calendars and try and give people more time in their day because we're all so busy. But then we were like, everyone wants to know what's going on in everyone's day in life. And, then we were spending too much time trying to like write it all down, put it into a Notion doc and giving all these updates. And then it's like, why don't we just get on a call and have everyone just give a quick 10-minute spiel about what their priorities are, or what they're working on, or some successes lately, or, some challenges that they're facing. Right. And just bring it out in the open. Right. So we just kind of opened everything up to, with running with a smaller team to be able to do that. And it's actually, you think, oh, it's time out of someone's day, but yeah, I think it actually eliminates this loss of communication that you get, when
Remotely.
all
Yeah.
working
You
so
guys are
fast
remote too, I
to
assume.
be
So.
aligned.
So I guess I'll just button it up with this. One, this episode will get released in the new year, so it'll be Christmas in between. Because I didn't figure I'd post an episode on Christmas Day with the marketing team. I might
I
give
get
it
it.
one day off. I don't know. I'm sure you could schedule it ahead, but I said no podcast this week. But if you have a ICP of brokerages, LSPs,
Mhm.
what's the best way they find Navix?
Best way to find Navix, I would say utilize the website. We're very active on LinkedIn. We continue to go to events, right? All the mainstream events that you see out there. So probably the best way to do it. And otherwise, majority of our business comes through referrals. So
There you go.
if you know someone, we're pretty open about who we work with on our website, right? And so find someone in the local community that and ask them if they've worked with Navix.
All right.
That's a really great way to do it. Otherwise, reach out to me on LinkedIn. It happens all the time. More often than not, we're get our first meeting set up with a prospect. Next thing you know, I'm getting a message on the side from someone at their company that's like in the C-suite. That's just, hey, can you tell me about Navix a little bit? So it's
awesome.
surprising, right? But it's good.
Yeah. All right. Well, appreciate it, Eric. Another episode of Let's Talk Logistics in the book. Have a Merry Christmas, and we'll see you at the New Year. See ya.
Yeah, Merry Christmas, Gabe. Merry Christmas, Rocket, and the whole team over there. Thanks for the partnership, and looking forward to 25.
All right. We'll see ya.